Here is journalist, I can actually say journalist, Matt Taibbi, who is one of the guys that released the Twitter files, on with Joe Rogan, talking about how much money Bill Gates has pumped into media outlets.
I mean, again, the news business is so starved for revenue that they'll bend to anybody, basically.
Did you see that? I mean, I know Jimmy Dore covered it, but quite a few other people have realized it now. The amount of money that Bill Gates has spent on influencing media.
No, I didn't.
It's somewhere in the neighborhood of $300 million.
Jeez.
He's donated to these various media organizations, which for sure has some sort of an impact on how they cover him.
Right. Well, of course, yeah. And look, once upon a time, we were, I've said it many times, we were trained to know that, for instance, think tanks, right, like who was funding them, because think tanks are who get quoted in the New York Times and the Washington Post, right?
Recently examined nearly 20,000 charitable grants the Gates Foundation made through the end of June and found that more than $250 million going towards journalism. Receipts included news operations like the BBC, NBC, Al Jazeera, ProPublica, National Journal, The Guardian, Univision, Medium, The Financial Times, The Atlantic, The Texas Tribune, Gannett, Washington Monthly, Le Monde, is that how I say it?
Yeah, Le Monde.
And the Center for Investigative Reporting.
And as a reporter, you may or may not be aware of all the different ways that money will get in, work its way into the business. But unconsciously, it just sort of seeps in. Like,
right.
And that's how it works. Like, nobody comes and tells you, well, don't cover this. Well, maybe they do now, actually. Or take this approach to covering education. What ends up happening is that you just kind of get a feel based on the reaction of your editor to whatever pitch you're giving at the moment.
I think Taibbi's last point there is the interesting one. When Gates gives this money, so $250 million to those organizations, I mean, you heard the list there, like they're basically all leftist organizations. And then they just so happen to be in line with all of Gates' feelings about climate change and the World Economic Forum and everything else. That is in stark contrast, ladies and gentlemen, to the way we do the Rubin Report here. You know how we do it? We're fan-funded. That's it. I don't get money from anybody else, and nobody that does fund us on Locals has any control over my content. I don't even know what everyone who's watching this political beliefs are, and that's just fine, right? If I started taking money, I mean, really just try to think about this for a second. If Bill Gates called us up and said, hey, Dave, you've been a little critical of me lately, but I can tell you're a decent guy and I'm a decent guy. So we'd like to give you $500,000 a year for a couple of years. And you just keep doing the show to the best of your ability. Do you think I might be less critical of Bill Gates then? So do you see how this thing operates? It's not that they sit them down, as Taibbi's saying, although maybe they do now because it's become so brazen. But this is what they do. And this is what we have seen pharmaceutical companies and virtually every big machine entity do. They buy everything.